Public Forum Committee meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, I'll call on Mark Lefebvre, resident, for a presentation respecting City of Thorold bylaw compliance and enforcement, rental properties. And before he goes to starts his presentation, I'll remind Mark that he has a maximum of 10 minutes to present to the committee, and I'd like to welcome you, Mark.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll do my best to keep within the 10 minutes. And I will not read every single screen. What I will do is just make comments as I go from screen to screen. Can everybody see the presentation? Is it on my screen?
One sec, I'll ask Mark, our city clerk, if he can get
Not on yet, but you do still have the ability to share. So if you can select your share screen.
Yeah, I'm going to go back. Sorry, I'm going to exit. Okay.
There we are.
Is that better?
Coming up now, Mark.
Okay, I'm
There
getting
we
the
are.
hang of it.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. You're up and running.
Okay, where I'm probably going to run into a bit of difficulty is going to the police reports, but we'll get there when we get there. So I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to allow me to speak this evening. I'd like to talk about the City of Thorold bylaws, talk about perhaps how they're monitored, how they're complied with by residents of the city, and perhaps what enforcement should entail. I by no means want to point fingers. I'm just looking for some ideas, for some help with the situation that I'm having. So I'm going a few things. I've got some goals of the presentation. I have difficulty when I'm speaking with staff and having bylaw complaints. I don't get much information, so there has to be some kind of protocol for handling and disposition of these complaints, and that there's a good process of communication between the people that are complaining, city staff, bylaw staff, and perhaps council if they have questions. Residences that continuously break bylaw codes, they have to be monitored. There has to be more enforcement, I think, in my opinion, and hopefully we'll come up with some ideas that council can speak to. So I've got some things to think about. You know, there are some best practices around in the municipality or outside the municipality for bylaw enforcement, how they communicate with people that are complaining. So what are those? If specifically, I'm talking about noise bylaws, noise complaints that I don't find overly effective, and if the enforcement can't happen because of the time of the night that it happens, why can't bylaw enforcement work shifts so they can actually see what's going on when I call and complain? And how can the police support bylaw enforcement? Like, you can make freedom of information requests, councillors. I did. You can get information from the police. They can also support if there's anybody worried about that works for staff that's worried about their safety and things. You give them a call and they'll come and help. And I know that because I used to work for them. Something that I'm very concerned about, there's 11 people living in the house beside me. Can the number of those rental units, since it's a single family dwelling, can they be restricted or licensed? There's 2 parking spaces. There's at least 8 cars there. It's always noisy. We live beside quite honestly, I live beside a disco. It's an all-night disco. And if the same houses are always on people's radar, can they not be monitored more consistently by bylaw patrol? Especially if there's a lot of complaints about them. So a little bit about myself. All I'm saying to you in this slide is that I have a really good background in enforcement, in legislation, in application, in dispute resolution. So I'm hoping that there could be some ideas. In my experience, it's not about no, how come it can't work? It's about what can we do to make it work for everybody? And that's really what the goal is. So I've got some recommendations for you to think about. Like when somebody complains, like I've got a few emails that I'll share with you, but they were hard to come by. And so the acknowledgement of a complaint in a timely fashion or a follow-up, like nobody ever called me, nobody talked to me, nobody ever talked to the witnesses that I provided information. And then what happens when the complaint is out there? Like, what's the resolution? How's that communicated to people, especially the person complaining? And then you can just work through NRP to get all the information you need. That's what I'm saying. So here's my issue. The house is at 64 Parkdale. It's right beside me. I live at 157 St. David, so it's right on kitty corner. It's been rented out for a number of years now, going at least on 3 years. There's 11 tenants there. The driveway only holds 2, so there's 8 cars. You can ask the garbage people every time they try and get by the snow plows. You can't get by the streets. That's a minor concern of mine. Mine's the noise. There's garbage littering the place all the time. City bylaw does help with that. They've been good with that. But noise complaints, I've made 9 calls to police in the middle of the night, being woken up by the loud, it's Indian music, it's pounding and it's loud, wakes me up out of sleep because our houses are adjacent. I've made 2 complaints to Thorold bylaw. It's not a new residence that's been a problem, it's an old residence been a problem. It's switched ownership a couple times, the current owners in Brampton. So when I do complain and I try and get some action through city staff, the bylaw staff, I get these are the response I get. Concerns are not within the jurisdiction of bylaw. Well, I disagree. I got one in September. It said, thank you for sharing your concerns. We'll take a look at it. But then there was nothing, nothing further. I didn't hear anything. Then when I spoke about the enforcement of noise violations, talked about the police enforcing it. And then I was told that although the police have been there numerous times, they have not identified any significant noise concerns. Well, that's not true at all. And I have the reports to show you that it's not true. So my question is noise at night not within the jurisdiction of bylaw enforcement? Because it says the officer is satisfied. That's what the bylaw says. You can be satisfied by the information you receive. You don't have to find people committing it. And if you do have to find people committing the infractions, you need to work midnights. So they're not solely enforced by the police, because when I call the police, they tell me it's a city bylaw matter. So I looked at I've got a good background in this. I looked at this noise bylaw. Everything that you need is there. It talks about what noise is. It talks about what the person can't do. It talks about actually the point of reception. So I have my windows closed, and it talks about the time you can't do things. And it talks about the enforcement. An officer is satisfied. Well, I hope they were satisfied with the information I provided, and I'll talk about that right now. So I provided city bylaw, the names and contacts of corroborating witnesses, fellow neighbors, screenshots of all cell phone communications I've had with the owner of the property, asking him to stop, photo documentation of my concerns, video documentation of the incidents, and all the notes where I call the police. If I'm getting up at midnight, 11:30, 2:30, that's a problem. I have a right to legally enjoy my property. I have a right to go to sleep and stay asleep. So here's where I could use your help, Mr. Trenholm. I'm trying to switch over to the police reports just so people can understand what they are. So I'll look at. So my question is, how can I get to the police reports? Or do you have a copy of them? Do people have a copy of them that they can refer to while I talk to them?
I can put them up on the screen if you'd like.
That'd be helpful. I'll just talk very briefly to them and I'll ask you to forward them. I'm just trying to make my screen small. There we go. Okay, so I can read to them as they're, so these are not specific general occurrence reports. These are the copies of the dispatch reports. And I got them through a Freedom of Information request. I called 9 times. I didn't get all 9 of them, but I got some. And I just want to, just so we're all on the same page, if you look at the highlighted sections, on June 30th, I called at 1:26 in the morning. I was awoken. They didn't get there for another half hour. When they got there, they told the party to shut down, and then they left. And that's what usually police do. They're very busy. That's what they do. And so they didn't put in a report. They cleared it by card, it's called. Again, on the 13th, I called at 11:30. They didn't get there till about 4 hours later, 3:15 in the morning. Well, there's nobody there at 3:15, but I was awoken a few times that night, and I had called, and so no report. When they went by, there was no report. On the 10th of October, I called at 12:30. They got there an hour later. They talked to the people, and they asked them to turn down the noise. On the 14th of November, I called at 12:15. They got there an hour later. I called again. You look down, additional remarks. They finally told the people to stop it, and then they left. So that's most of the time what the police do. So there's all kinds of information available to substantiate any concern or complaint, bylaw complaint that I make, to satisfy an officer that indeed there's a disruption and there's a complaint for noise. Then I had to insist, the last one is a general occurrence report. If you just flip right through, that's a general occurrence report. And in the starred section, I insisted that the officer take a report. He was very helpful. He went and warned the people that any future noise complaints would likely result in a bylaw charge. It was also explained to them the potential for a mischief. It's a criminal code mischief charge. Everybody has the right to enjoy their property, and when you don't allow that, you're committing mischief under the criminal code. Pretty heavy-handed, but I'm just trying to get my point across. So we'll go back to the slides if you don't mind, Mr. Trenner. Does anybody got any questions about what those are? So look, the first few reports, they're not police reports per se. They're not general occurrence reports written up. They're just copies of the dispatcher's notes. And we'll go from right there would be great. Right there. So this is what I given. It says and the bylaw talks about where an officer is satisfied. So those are the sources of information that I gave city staff. So they have all this, including my notes. I write notes. I'm an ex-policeman. I take a lot of notes, especially when I'm concerned about things. I'm gonna get out of that. Okay, so what can we do? We can look at best practices for bylaw enforcement. There are better models out there. I have friends that live in the Falls. When there are bylaw concerns, the offending homes, they get notices right away. And do you have to, if indeed night is an issue for noise and an issue for parking and things like that, and nobody's moving on it, should bylaw staff work nights? And can they? And the answer is yes, they should liaise with the police. I'm told that they do, but when I was told that they do, I was told that they weren't concerned. Well, these reports show that they were concerned. They were concerned enough, the dispatchers, to take notes, concerned enough, I had to insist on a report. So there is a concern. It substantiates my complaints. That information is available and is accessible through Freedom of Information. And if enforcement is fearful, they can call the police to keep the peace. If they need to identify certain people, if people are getting rowdy, they can go there and they can get the assistance of the police to help them with their investigations. And the big one, my uncle owns John's Meat Shop. It's a home that he's converted into a business. pays business taxes. The house beside me is a home that's been converted into a business. That guy makes a lot of money on tenant. Why don't they pay business taxes? Why can't it be restricted? It's a single residential family dwelling in a neighborhood, but there's a loud disco every night. Next slide, please. So what can we do? Well, if somebody complains to bylaw, an acknowledgement that the complaints would happen. An email, I said I was superintendent. If somebody complained, if I had a parent complain, I'd say, thank you, I'm in receipt of your email. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Could be busy, but I will get back to you. And then what's the follow-up? Is there acknowledgement email that we're working on it? Is there a telephone call? I listed witnesses, no witnesses. I talked to those people. I know them. I gave them the information. Nobody's been spoken to. And then what's the outcome? Do I have to chase down the outcome? If they're not going to proceed, I want to know why. And then I would like to know if there's an appeal mechanism if I disagree with the outcome of bylaw. If bylaw staff says based on certain factors, they're not going to proceed, and I can give them information to help them make a decision, a better decision, one that's helpful to the citizens, why can't that happen? I think that's almost about it. Next one, please. Thanks. So this is the garage, by the way. This is the disco. And I walked right up and took the picture because it's open all the time. Just doesn't work as much now. They do it inside the house more, it's cold. But it will start again when the weather breaks. And it was, have the policemen called? Yeah, they got called just before Christmas. It wasn't by me. I just want to finish, if just so council understands that this is not just myself complaining. Mr. Trenum was approached today by somebody that wanted to weigh in on this conversation. I gave him the gentleman, I gave the information. I was communicating back and forth. So he writes to me, and I'm just reading an email. It says, thanks, Mark. It's a very important issue, not just to you, but to hundreds of residents. In my opinion, the city's bylaw enforcement system definitely needs a major overhaul. I'll watch it live on YouTube. So I hope that gentleman's listening, and I hope that something good happens out of this. And I hope I can get some relief. My wife was opening she just went downstairs yesterday. It was 2:30 in the morning. The strobe lights were on and the music was loud. But are we calling right now? Well, we haven't called because there's nothing going on, because we're not getting help from the bylaw, and we're having trouble with the police too. So thank you for your time, and I invite you, if you have any questions for clarification, anything I can help with, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you for your presentation, Mark, and I'm going to open the floor for questions. I got Councillor DeRose up first. Go ahead, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mark. Excellent presentation. I read it over a couple times. Since starting my conversations with Mark, I have brought up about bylaws working at night. I know it's a contractual thing. I can probably get Jason to answer that, but I'm not going to let up. And we're working, I know bylaw and building are working on limiting the number of bedrooms going forward. So I'm hoping we have some success in the near future. Mark, just a question. Thanks for your persistence in not giving up with this, because like that email said to you, there's hundreds of people in Thorold that are experiencing this. You've exhausted all the avenues available to a resident through policing and bylaw. So have the issues subsided at all with the threat of police are going to get called, or bylaw may get involved? Has anything subsided as far as the partying and the disruption of your right to have a peaceful life?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. DeRose. I wouldn't say that. My wife, she's given me a number of notes, so it's still continuing, but it's not as loud because it's not through the garage. The weather's been cold, they've been inside, but you can still hear it, and it still wakes if somebody's awake, or it still happens where people wake up in the house. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still happening. And I've spoken to the people there. I've spoken to the residents. I have it on film, and they just smile and yeah, and then it just keeps happening. And it will continue to happen. The disco is still open. On your way home, you can drive by that house. The garage will be half open, and you'll see the disco on. The lights will be on.
So Mark, in summing that up, apparently no change at all.
No, there's not change. It's going to get worse as the weather breaks.
Okay, thank you, Mark, I appreciate that.
Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thanks for the presentation. Well done. I agree with you on a lot of points. We have a lot of problems like this in the city. And I'm hoping, I've talked with Jason before, I'm hoping we can work with union and staff, get more staff, and to have off shifts. I understand you come from enforcement. We're not asking bylaw to go in and break it up, but at least if you have a presence there before the party starts or just as the party starts, letting you know this isn't good if the disco's getting going, that could prevent a lot in the off hours, and then call the police if you're not getting any result from there. So that's what I'm hoping. I think that would help everywhere in the city. So thank you for the presentation.
Councillor D'Angelo. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you want questions? I have some staff questions and then I have some Mark questions. Do you want them just filtered all out at the same time?
No, because Jason's going to be speaking after this, so just any questions you have to Mark right now.
Okay, all right. So thanks, Mark, for bringing this to the attention of the city. I agree, problematic houses are spread out through Thorold. And it seems like only when something severe happens is some action seems to be taken. I know this house here, I believe this is the one that had a drug bust in it a few years ago, or was
Yeah,
it?
that was one of the slides. It was the crack house. But
Yeah,
I was still complaining about the noise. They were pounding on the door all night long.
yeah. The one question, do you know if any fines have been issued by anybody throughout this process of calling police or calling bylaw? Has
No,
anything?
nothing like that's been communicated to me. Thank you for that question.
Okay, that's, I have a few more, but I think they're more posed to our, to
Okay.
Mr. Simpson, so
We'll deal with
I'll
them,
wait.
yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Hare, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre, for your great presentation. That was very informative, and I feel for your situation. I know that I've also been dealing with other issues on the same street, so I know there's a number of issues there. And my question is a simple one. I'm just curious if ever this disturbance is going on in the daytime, a time when we know bylaw enforcement is much more easily accessible, or does it limit itself to the latter hours in the evening?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Mr. O'Hare. The answer is the parking issue. Any parking issues is daytime. You can see that the morning. It'll go right till the end till those people go to work or do whatever they're going to do. The noise is at night. They gather at night. They start gathering, and it goes well into past the midnight hours. There are very large parties, and there are a lot of people there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. One quick question. I'm not sure if you know, are the residents of this house students at post-secondary institutions? Are you aware?
That's a great question, and that would be great if they were, but I don't believe they are. I believe they work out and about the city. And I don't know much about their backgrounds, and I don't know what they do for
Okay,
a
no,
living.
thank
But
you very much.
They're doing something for a living, whatever that is.
My follow-up was going to be whether you had spoken to any of those educational institutions, but that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions before we move on to Jason Simpson? Councillor Decker, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. Although some of the other councillors asked the questions I was going to ask about the fines, if it was students living there, has the property been cleaned up? Like, have they been, do you know if this is a problem that continues with garbage all over the property? It's embarrassing that, a house would have that much garbage and no one's gone there to tell them to clean it up. Is this something that continues at that property?
Thank you, Councillor Decker for that question. Yeah, it continues at the property. The city bylaw staff's been helpful with that. The last time I complained, I sent the picture, there was a toilet in the middle of the yard, toilet by the front of the house, toilet in the middle of the yard, tires, things like that. I think bylaws, to my knowledge, bylaws been there a couple times for that, but I'm continuously picking up, like, try to be a good neighbor. I'll pick up the garbage. My little garbage I'll pick up, but the big stuff I can't move myself, or nor do I want to enter their property to move it.
Yeah, I empathize with what you're going through. I know we've had some issues in our neighborhood here with students, you know, when they rent houses and stuff and they have parties going on till, you know, wee hours of the morning. So I have some questions, I guess, when it's Jason speaking. But once again, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm going to move on now to Jason Simpson. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mark, for coming and sharing your thoughts. I understand Mark's concerns, and I share a lot of them myself. With the particular issue that he's dealing with, we have investigated during the day, mind you. We've gone there and sat there for an hour, hour and a half on a couple of instances around dinner time. Because I believe Mark had identified that it at times have started around that time, and we haven't witnessed any noise. I have spoken to the police on several occasions with regards to this specific concern, and what I was told was that they had at that time attended 7 times they had in the record. On no instance had they found any noise that they found to be offensive or excessive. There was once or twice that they had asked the residents to turn down the noise, but even at that, the officers had told me that it wasn't because they felt it was excessive, but it was just an effort to try and keep the peace. The police services, as council is aware, do provide bylaw enforcement in the evening, whether it be noise or any other. It's not a service that the City of Thorold provides through their bylaw enforcement division at this point in time. However, there has been a request by council recently to look into this, and a report will come in the future with regards to that. I'm not sure, well, in this instance, the police have told me that they haven't found violations to the noise, so I guess that might be the reason why they haven't issued any noise bylaw violations. They do have the authority to do so, should they find a violation and feel it's warranted to issue that. I'm not sure what more I could say at this time with regards to this matter, but I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, so I'll open the floor for questions, and I'll start with Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jason. Jason, if Mark taped this occurring, because obviously I've had to call the police too, and you know sometimes they take many hours, so the situation is diffused or over. If he taped that, is that sufficient evidence to come to bylaw or the police if he's got it recorded? Because I know the police are saying, well, yeah, it wasn't loud. You know, well, you know what? Try sleeping next door to it. And you know what I'm saying? I think they're trivializing it. If you can answer that, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. That's a good question, Councillor DeRose. It's very difficult to issue a penalty based on that. One, the officer doesn't know the details behind that evidence that's being provided. We don't have evidence necessarily as to who collected that evidence. When was that evidence collected? Was it collected at that address? How loud was that noise? It can be difficult to tell from a recording. Where was that noise recorded from? And all those kind of things need to be substantiated or proven in order to lay a charge or be successful in moving forward with a penalty being issued. And so that's why we insist that the evidence that's being collected needs to be done by the officer, so that when the officer is testifying to that evidence, they have firsthand knowledge that this offense occurred. We have the option, or we could potentially look at issuing a Part 1 charge and taking the offenders to court over the matter, but based on the witnesses' evidence, but the officers, the bylaw officers, wouldn't be able to provide any testimony other than the fact that they received evidence from the resident, and then the resident would have to testify, and the justice of the peace would have to determine whether or not the evidence is admissible, or whether or not there is enough evidence to substantiate the charge. That is quite expensive and timely on the city's part. And in this particular case, the fact that the police have told me that they've been there 7 times and have never found a violation makes it even more difficult for us to justify putting in that cost on taxpayers' money for a noise complaint. It's not that we want to minimize the concern, but we just haven't been able to collect enough evidence to substantiate something to go through that extensive process.
Thank you, Jason. I just, I have trouble, I believe that once the police pull up and they get wind of it inside, I'm sure they calm down, and, you know what I'm saying? So I don't look at the accuracy of that police comments that you've received. I don't believe they're accurate, just because, like I said, as soon as you know the cops are coming, right, everything goes down the toilet and everybody straightens up, and it's just my opinion. But no criticism toward the police, but I just, you know, I don't think Mark would call if it was just frivolous, knowing Mark, but anyway, but thank you for the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Councillor D'Angelo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Simpson. I checked on the website. This property's licensed, so 64 Parkdale Drive. Now, with that license, do we have any jurisdiction in terms of, like, if they're having a disco there, is there fire code violations? Like, is there an excessive amount of people that are there? Is that an angle we can look at? Inspections, how often is this house inspected? And then another one's graduated license, but I'll speak to that a little later. But I guess my 2 quick questions are here. Have we checked the house for fire code violations, and have we done regular inspections on this house? To you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor D'Angelo. I wouldn't be able to speak to fire code violations. Those questions would have to be referred to the fire department, unfortunately. They would perform any kind of inspections as it relates to the fire code. Based on my limited knowledge of the fire code requirements for single detached homes, which is what this is currently considered to be, is fairly laxed under the fire code, but those questions are really best deferred to the fire department. And sorry, if you could repeat the second question.
The second one, that's fire code violations. The one is regular inspections as a licensed rental property?
Yes. So I can't say 100% how many times it's been inspected, but I could speculate that it has likely only been inspected with the exception of when we've been responding to complaints. But from a licensing perspective, it's likely only been inspected on a biannual basis when the licenses come up for renewal and re-inspections.
I think one of the outcomes I see from this meeting is that we identify what's called a problematic house and come forward with a stricter set of regulations for a problematic house. That's what I'd like to see, because there's a lot of houses out there that they cut their grass twice a year, they don't pick up their garbage, and by the time we call, by the time things happen, you just get frustrated. And you're probably getting a reduction of people calling because nothing happens in their mind. That happened to me personally with a property across from my dad's. Things just don't seem to be moving in a fast-paced action. So I think we have to look at some sort of way of identifying problematic houses, come forward with that. The other one is a graduated license. I think we have to look at the rental housing license bylaw and look at that. Houses that are using up the resources of this community, especially noise complaints, garbage complaints. I believe, maybe Mr. Simpson can answer the question. How much is it for a license fee right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the current fee for the initial license is $500, and that's. And to renew the license, it is $400 for every 2 years after that. I will add that we are currently conducting a review of residential rental licensing because we know that there's a lot of opportunities for improvement. And our intentions are to bring some recommendations to council this year, hopefully within the first half of the year. And but I'm happy to hear any feedback from any members of council. I'm more than willing to receive a phone call, meet, or through email, any recommendations that anyone may have.
Okay, I'm not sure if there's any others that are doing a graduated licensing system, but I think that's something we need to look at. So if a renewal for a person's $400, if they have a spotless record, it might be $50, and if they don't have a spotless record, it should be $2,000. I think you have to start hitting people in the pocketbook if you want to change some of the attitudes of some of these rental properties, and we have to start forcing that. That's something I'd like to see in the upcoming report, is how a graduated licensing program can improve the situation. Also, looking at the problematic houses, a set of standards for them, that they should be treated at a higher level. And I'm a little concerned, and this goes to Councillor DeRosa's comments. When the police get there, probably the noise has been turned down, but we're going to have to work a little bit closely. I sit on the police board. I will bring this up as an issue to discuss with them, but I think fines need to be issued. After a house has had a couple calls, after one call, I could see one call, maybe someone plays their music loud. When they get a second, third, fourth, and it was up to 7 calls for police assistance regarding this, it's not imaginary. So something needs to be levied. Again, financial burdens usually change behavioral patterns, and we need to look at that and work with the police a little bit more on that. And the other thing, I don't know, being a new counselor here, I haven't seen a report yet, but is there a monthly or quarterly report that comes from the bylaw department regarding calls, how many have been cleared, anything along that line? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Simpson. Is that something that comes quarterly, monthly, a report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is not a regular occurrence that we provide, or a regular update that we provide to council. It is something that we could look at providing possibly through council correspondence, and I guess I would leave it up to council as to how often they would want to receive that.
Okay. I would like to you, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to just see it through council correspondence. I wanted to see it on the consent part of our agenda. It's really, I would like to see it monthly, but I don't want to be forcing staff into an abundance of work, so quarterly is good with me. So if you want to start off quarterly, see how that is. I'm not here to create extra work for staff, but I think council needs to be informed, and we need to get the message out of what's happening in our community regarding bylaw enforcement, how many charges have been laid, how many infractions, which ones have been cleared, which ones we're having trouble with. And this will help us make policy decisions going forward. If we're seeing specific ones not being cleared, why? What do we need to change in the bylaw? We need to review that very quickly and more effectively and on a regular basis. So I think that report would be helpful. Again, I'm not here to burden staff with paper, but I think it's good for council. Those are my comments right now, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That's a good point. We used to receive those. I think we used to get them quarterly. So I think it'd be a good idea to get those back up and running.
Okay. And again, I'd like to see those as part of the consent agenda of our meetings.
Anyone else have questions for? Go ahead, Councillor O'Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Simpson, you had spoken earlier about a report that you're working on for evening bylaw enforcement. I was just wondering if you could inform us of an approximate time frame when you hope to have that out. It'd be really valuable to us to know your ideas and staff's direction. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Hare, thank you for that question. it may be a little bit optimistic, but I'm hoping for February, sometime in February. Definitely within the first quarter.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to add that one thing that's worked, and Jason, you might want to comment on it, is when we had the issues, especially in Winterberry, Juneberry, and we worked with Brock University, we not only had the police services and our bylaw, but also representatives from Brock going to this problem locations and paying visits, and it paid dividends. And so we may have to look at something like that where we get our bylaw and the police to pay a visit to that house together, or whatever houses it is, and basically, I think those type of communications helped us a lot. On the other side, I think it could be something we could look at here as well. That's all. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we have two things here. So one is that we just deal with this case, or we direction to staff to have a staff report on bringing back a staff report dealing with the suggestions that were raised this evening, as well as the report that you're working on. Is that the route that council wants to go? I guess I open the floor to that. Go ahead, Councilor Jan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make a motion that we do get a staff report coming back regarding the concerns addressed in this, and then the concerns that were spoken to by councilors. As a start, I think that would be a good move in the right
Okay, so
direction.
you're gonna move that, and now you got a seconder with Councilor Sentence. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, and Mark, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that's what we're doing as a first step, and we will continue to follow up, and we will work with you. And I want to thank you for coming to council this evening, and for the great presentation that you made.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Just last note, the last owner of that property, they made $50,000 a year. So licensing fees, if you put them up, I don't think they're going to hurt that bad in the pocketbook.
Once again, thank you so much. There being no further business, this meeting is hereby adjourned at 6:14 p.m.